Good evening. Welcome to this live feed. Hoping everybody's extraordinarily well. Relationships. It's an important one. I have been speaking to relationships for some time. I've been speaking to the importance of relationships for some time. I truly value the depth of what intimate relationship with self primarily can give us, and what intimate relationship with others that we care for, that we are aligned with, can also provide us with. And in today's topic, today's exploration, and I want to clarify something. Hey, Fran, how are you, my love? I want to clarify something about relationships. This is really interesting. And we're probably going to go on a few tangents this evening, but I'm going to be concise and really speak to 5 reasons out of so many, of course, but 5 quite profound reasons as to why relationships fail. Fail isn't probably the right word, but why relationships suffer, why relationships move into a great deal of pain and suffering. And hi, Penelope, how are you? Let me know that you're here, beautiful people. Maybe an emoticon or hello. Let me know how you're feeling today. Paulette, hello. Deborah, hello. So relationships are the cornerstone of our growth, whether it be the relationship that we have to self. Michelle, how are you? Lovely to see you as well. Sandra, hello. Whether it be the relationship that we have to self, whether it be the relationship that we hold with our romantic, intimate partners, whether it be key relationships we hold into our lives, with our families, with our friends, with our loved ones, with an idea, with a purpose, with our beliefs, with our models of reality, with the way that we move, that we choose to move through the world. So how we relate to how we actually behave and how we actually treat ourselves. Yes, Lana, this will be on YouTube. I'll upload it after this. It will be on the playlist live video feeds, absolutely, on my YouTube channel, S.Sifandos. Welcome to everybody that is coming on. Janelle, welcome. Diane, hello. This is wonderful to have everybody here. So very deep subject matter. And the reason for this particular live feed, Andrew, how are you? The reason for this particular live feed is I had a revelation. I experienced a revelation recently, actually, in the last couple of days, that has really shifted much of what I've experienced in my life and the way I've understood the world and understood relationships, especially the way I relate to myself, and especially the way I give and receive care, affection, love, etc. And it's been a really massive shift in me. And I want to go through these 5 points, these 5 reasons why relationships suffer and break down, and what we can actually do as people, having that wisdom and that knowledge prior to entering a relationship, really being in deeper contact with self. And I'm thinking where I want to start. I want to start with transference. And I did a post on this, I believe it was yesterday. So today's the 14th of June. I did a post on this on Facebook on the 13th of June and Instagram and so forth, and LinkedIn as well. Renee, welcome. How are you? It's lovely to see you. Andrew, that's awesome, brother. And I want to begin with transference. And let me explain transference and what it means in very simple terms, or as simple as possible. It's when something in our environment, a person, a dialogue, a discourse, a conversation that we have, a communication, something someone does, something in our environment triggers something unconscious or implicit within us. So we're not consciously aware of it. We're not fully aware of it. We cannot really understand what's going on. And it elicits this particular behavior that would seem unreasonable at the time by ourselves and also by the others that are experiencing what we are expressing. And this becomes very interesting. So, for example, and I'll give you a very specific example on this, and this is generally trapped trauma or fear or trapped pain or conditioning that we've experienced as young people, generally during our developmental years, that influence the way we move through the world and actually behave. So this transference is we're transferring this unconscious behavior into the present moment, and it has nothing to really do with the present moment, but we are being triggered by something, by a memory, by it could be a color, it could be a smell, it could be something someone says, the way they say it, the way they express themselves. It could be key words that remind us implicitly, unconsciously, so we're unaware of it, of what this pain was. And we bring that pain unbeknown to us, and we bring that pain into that present moment. And the other person's like, what the fuck's going on? All I said was this, this, and that. And you're like, no, no, no. And you're very angry, and you're emotionally transferring this pain from the past, or you're upset, you're angry, you're sad, you're defensive, your ego's in pain. You're coming from a place of fear, and then you just project. Whew. That's tough. Transference is really tough. And one of the key reasons why transference causes so many relationships to suffer is because we don't know where it's coming from. We don't know until we really begin to explore ourselves and begin to understand our patterns. And a great place to start, because I promise you, I'm not just going to give you 5 reasons why relationships suffer. We're also guilty of this as well. When I say guilty, we're all responsible of this in so many different ways, some more than others, of course. But I only don't want to give you 5 points as to why relationships suffer. I also want to assist you in maybe understanding what may mitigate the onset of this, and what you can do and who you can be as a person, a heart-based person, someone leading from the mind, but also leading from the heart. In fact, really primarily leading from the heart and allowing the mind to interpret what the heart is saying. To be that person in relationship that is not triggered and controlled by unconscious patterning. And transference is it's a tough one. It's a painful one as well. It's very painful. And it's painful for the person that's projecting, the person, the culprit, so to speak. And it's painful for the person that is receiving that as well. So how do we begin to explore transference? How do we begin to explore ourselves in this way? Well, we observe patterns. That's a starting point. Begin by observing patterns. Begin by observing patterns in your life, especially patterns in intimate relationship. How do you behave under particular stresses or pressure? How do you react or respond to events that you would look at and think to yourself, well, that doesn't really make sense. Why am I being upset? Why am I being angry? This is an interesting point, but let me give you an example. So, for example, a person comes in, begins to live with someone. So 2 people get together and they begin to live with each other in intimacy, in romantic intimacy and romantic partnership. And it's the first time they're living together. So they've had some experience of maybe spending some time with each other in each other's separate homes, but now they're living together. And as we all know, there's a certain level of comfort and familiarity that comes over time, not always attached to complacency, but sometimes attached to complacency. But that's another conversation for another time. In fact, complacency could be one of the reasons as to why relationships suffer. But I'm actually not mentioning. I'm not deep diving into complacency today. But they get together and they begin to just share space. Yeah. So they share space, and one of the partners becomes or demonstrates they are quite messy. So they're leaving a lot of clothes around, they're leaving dishes undone. The domestic home is not clean and neat, and et cetera, et cetera. And this triggers deeply the other partner, and they begin to really become upset with this. Now, there could be a myriad of reasons as to why this is happening, but that causes tension and friction between the partners, and especially if they cannot communicate effectively and they don't know how to communicate in a mature manner, and they don't have a sense of emotional regulation. They can't self-regulate themselves emotionally, and they lack that emotional fitness or emotional intelligence. They'll begin to suffer. And they'll suffer silently. But they'll begin to become very triggered by this. And then some of us may think, well, it's just a few messy clothes, a couple of dishes, it's nothing really, it's this, it's that, it's nothing serious. And it may not be. But in the eyes of the beholder, In the mind of the beholder, it's something else. Maybe that, and I mentioned this in another live feed that I did with respect to understanding our layers, the layers of who we are. Because maybe one of those partners, maybe one of those people, they experience a great deal of scarcity when they were younger. Maybe they lived in dirty places and they associated a lot of pain with those places that they lived in. Maybe they associate that messiness with violence or aberrance or emotional discontinuity, whatever it could be. And that's not always the case, but often what happens is when something is really consistently triggering us and making us upset and sad and angry and tensile emotionally and physiologically, there's something deeper to that. There's events or a series of events or conditions that we've experienced in our environment during our developmental years that have caused us to think about the world in a particular way and have really defined our models of reality, define the way we behave without us really knowing. This is called implicit behavior, an implicit understanding of the world. Yet we behave in that way explicitly. And when people feel this, they feel the brunt of it, but they cannot make the connection as to why. And it can be quite painful. Maybe that person lived in a war-torn place where there was rubble and mess everywhere, where there was violence and gunfire and looting and unmentionable things, events, experiences. And having a home like that, a personal space like that, really triggers that person and they become emotional. They come from a place of fear. They come from a place of pain. And this causes tremendous friction. And they don't necessarily even know this. But we all, not all of us, but many of us have this logical sense of self. And if we take a moment to observe these patterns and perhaps this, what may appear to be conscious irrationalities, it's not irrational from an unconscious space. We can begin to de-layer ourselves. We can begin to pull apart the layers of who we are. And that requires effort and it requires a journey. And I recommend, or multiple journeys, I recommend that you align with someone that may be able to help you and be of service, that someone that may be able to understand you, whether it be a practitioner, whether it be a psychologist, whether it be a spiritual guide, whatever it may be, whomever it may be, someone that can serve you on your path, to assist you, to give you context, to give you a reference point. So that transference, relationships suffer deeply because of that transference. So the way to mitigate that is to actively, consciously explore who you are, examine yourself, understand yourself as best you can. Of course, begin the journey of exploration. The process is far more important than the outcome. Forget about any attached or projected outcome. It's about the journey. The exploration of itself is very powerful. So transference is one of the reasons why our relationships suffer or break down or fail. There's no failure, of course. Universal blame is another. So we're talking about ego projection here. So we're talking about blaming everything outside of ourselves except taking responsibility for who we are. So when we do not take responsibility for who we are, when we do not take ownership of who we are, guess what happens? Can anyone guess what happens when we do not take responsibility for our actions, that we do not take responsibility for who we are and how we move through the world? I wonder how long I can be silent for before someone maybe responds in a comment. Remember, the act itself of replying, of answering the question, of being present here, of thinking in that way, then expressing it, is very useful to the integration of the knowledge or the information as well. So it makes it very, very powerful when you begin to comment, because unfortunately Facebook doesn't have a voice feed, a voice function where you can speak your truth like a webinar per se. So you have to type it, yeah. But there's when we project and we blame others and we blame the world for the misfortune or the perceived misfortune or the perceived pain and that we're experiencing, the challenges and discomfort that we don't really like and that we don't sit very well with. Blame game, disempowering, Wow. I'm just looking at some of these comments. Wonderful. When we're not accountable for who we are, we can't shift. Diane says victimhood. Absolutely. We get stuck in this victimhood mentality. We feel sorry for ourselves, a very unattractive trait for starters, but it's unattractive to our own journey. We don't move, we don't learn, we don't grow. The primary or a primary function of who we are is to grow as individuals, is to grow as a collective, is to grow as a society. So when we do not take responsibility for who we are, and we project, and the reason why the ego projects is because it's safe, it feels better to do so. It's very confronting to blame oneself or to assume responsibility for who one is when perhaps we have acted out of integrity. It's very, very hard to face that. The ego doesn't want to know that we aren't adequate, that we aren't enough, that we aren't part of the in-group, that we are part of the out-group now. That threatens its survival, psychological, emotional, psychosocial, relational survival. Is very dangerous for the ego. So it's not healthy for the ego the way the ego perceives it. And we begin to fragment and fracture ourselves. So this universal blame, this ego projection can be very, very dangerous for who we are. Welcome to everybody that's coming on, by the way. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for making yourself known. Leah, Janelle, Denise, wonderful. Emma, welcome. So this ego projection is unhealthy because if we are constantly blaming others for who we are and how we behave, then how can we possibly change if we need to, if the change with the behavior that we are exhibiting requires transformation, transmutation, requires a varied approach to life. So this ego projection keeps us locked in and stunts our growth. Now, how do we begin to move past that? Well, we need to create a safe container and a safe space for ourselves to be able to express without being judged, without being critiqued. In my own life, it became very, very difficult. I would project often. And it became very difficult for me to take ownership of who I was in my life because of the experiences that I had as a young person. I was consistently and constantly criticized and judged and in a very harsh manner by my father. And that became very difficult for me to then look at the world and say, okay, I can take ownership of this. Because if I did something wrong, I was ostracized for it. I was subjugated for it. I was punished for it tremendously. So I would consistently blame others, or I developed a pattern of looking outside of myself instead of looking within myself. It was easier to do that. And that came from the external feedback I received as a young child. Now, obviously, I can elaborate on that quite seamlessly now. There's many, many years of going deep into self and making these connections and unpacking this and liberating the heart and opening the heart space. And the heart space is metaphorical for, opening our capacity to feel our own emotional being and well-being. But if we continue to project, we're going to continue to be disconnected in our relationships. And Casper says, I blamed everyone and anyone for years. And once I took ownership of my actions and mindset, everything became clearer and relationships became easier. Absolutely, Casper. We very much agree with that. Diane, but I was nurtured in many other different ways as well. And again, thank you very much for your compassion. Deeply appreciate that. Thank you, Emma. Yeah, absolutely, Deborah. So I'm no different to anybody else. Most of us, the vast majority of us, have gone through varied pain points in our lives. It's how diligent we are and how open we are to looking at these pain points, looking at these painful experiences, these fearful experiences, these disconnects that we've had, these challenges that we've experienced. It's how willing we are to go deep into that really begins to define our ability to progress and grow and transmute and transform. And it's not even so much depth, it's just a willingness to explore. So when we make a conscious choice to ask ourselves, okay, where am I responsible for my life? Instead of being stuck in that victimhood mentality, where am I responsible for my life? We start to empower ourselves. We start to empower ourselves in such a way that when we take action, we can become the master curators of our path and our journeys. And it becomes a very beautiful place to be. So when we are in relationship, we begin to take responsibility for the role that we play. So can you imagine being in a relationship and being consistently and constantly blamed for this, for that, for everything that goes wrong? Can you imagine that? That's very painful. And who wants to be in a relationship like that? Nobody. And the reality is that it's unconscious fears coming to the surface, unexamined patterns and behaviors, unexamined emotional states, unexplored. It becomes very painful. We don't need that. Sure, do we need pain to grow? Yeah, but we don't always need pain to grow. Let's be very clear on that. So why continuously place yourself in this devastating state of pain? It's not necessary. Let's move on to the third one. Low self-worth. This one's tough for many. Something, again, that I've experienced myself, sometimes continue to experience. To be very open and very clear, there are days where I doubt myself tremendously. When I doubt the person I am. Am I enough? Am I able? Am I good enough? Am I worthy enough to be on the path that I'm on? I have those days still. Now, how I equilibrate that and how I neutralize that and how I go deep into that is very different to how I used to in my younger days. Not that I'm old now, I'm very young. I'll be very clear on that. I'm super, super young. Relative term, right? But in my younger days, how I moved through that, how I explored that was very well. It was a lack of exploration, actually. So this low self-worth kept me engaging in behaviors that were not of integrity and that were feeding the ego. And it was at any cost. It would feed the ego at any cost. Now, what happens then is we become very selfish. We become hyper-selfish beings. And in that hyper-selfish posturing, we forget about other people. It becomes about us. Well, what about me? What can I get from this relationship? My self-worth is like, I need to feed that. It's like this ever-ending pit that you need to keep. This like a pit of there's many alligators in this pit, and you just got to keep feeding the alligators, keep feeding the alligators, keep feeding. They just always want to eat. They always want to eat. They always want to eat. There's thousands of them there. When do you stop? How do you stop feeding them? We have to stop feeding the ego. And low self-worth, it looks outside of ourselves because it bases its survival and self-esteem. So it's consistently comparing. And if we're consistently comparing, we're never going to, and that's the definition of self-esteem, we're never, ever, ever going to, we're never going to live ourselves authentically. So Deborah, it's interesting that you say that as well. It's not so much a struggle with self-worth. It's that self-worth comes up. I used to struggle with it. Self-worth, though, low self-worth rears its ugly head every now and then because we still have these patterns within us. If we're human, we're having a human experience, it's in our neurology, it's in our behavior. Something may occur in my environment that triggers something, reminds me, and it quickly takes me to a place where maybe of low self-worth, and I ask these questions. Now, again, I can quickly, relative term, equilibrate and neutralize that based on tools and techniques that I've developed for myself, that I've learned from so many other wonderful people in my life, formally, informally, in person, and just from reading amazing books and doing courses, etc., whatever it may be. And that's the beauty. You get to a point where when this stuff comes up, it's like you welcome it. And so I really welcome these patterns, because I say to myself, okay, wow, I'm feeling this particular way right now. There's something here for me to learn. There's something here for me to grow through. Exciting times. I'm going to break through. So let me break myself down so I can break through and move through this, whatever it may be. And I'm happy to do that. And that gets me excited. So I'm happy to feel that low self-worth. I'm happy to ask these questions around who I am and why am I behaving in this way and what is actually occurring in my being. And when we take this vantage point, we take this perspective, life becomes very different. We cease to fear what ails us. We cease to fear what disrupts us and hurts us. And we welcome that in when it comes. And the more we welcome it in, the quicker it dissipates. And the more gain and traction we get from the learning of it. So low self-worth is difficult in relationship because it distances us from those that we love and care for. And it allows us to project and act in a way that is hyper selfish or completely withdrawn, depending on our personality type, how we've grown up, how we interpret the world, etc. So how do we move through that low self-worth? Well, that's probably a live feed in and of itself, but let me start somewhere. Begin to understand who you are and what value you bring to the world. And if you really don't know what value you bring to the world, ask someone close to you, ask a number of different people close to you and say to them, tell me 5 things, 5 value points that I have that I bring to the world. Build some pride around that. Pride is a beautiful emotion. We don't have to stay in pride for too long, and we don't have to take it to the excess of the spectrum. But be with pride. It's a beautiful place to be. Own who you are. Really listen and feel what these people that love and care for you are saying. You're warm, you're compassionate, you're empathetic, you're a good listener, you're kind, you're caring, you're there for me, you're reliable. Think about that, because often how we see ourselves is not how others see us. I'm not saying that others' vantage point is better than yours or more important, but let's begin to put life in perspective. Where you think you're absolute shit, you're not. Absolute is an absolute term. You can move beyond that. Next, one of the major reasons why relationships break down is because people do not know what they want. And people do not know what they want because people do not know themselves. Interesting. We move into a relationship and we don't know who we are. We don't know what we really want. We're going with the status quo, what the mainstream says. We're going with, well, what are people thinking about us? What are people feeling about us? What do people really want from us? And we're satisfying the value sets of others and not satisfying the value sets of our own being, because we don't know what our own values are. We don't know how to live life authentically. Again, I was one of these people, not knowing what I really value, not knowing what my purpose was, not having clarity, not being discerning, not being open, living other people's values, what other people expected of me. Do this because that's what society wants. Do this because that's what your parents want. Do this because that's what they want. Do this because that's what your friends say, your peer groups, whatever it may be. You've got to know yourself and you've got to know what you want. When you know what you want in relationship and you know what you want for yourself, how you wish to be treated, how you wish to express, how you wish to understand the world, how you wish to be received, how you wish to be known, how you wish to be seen, how you wish to be sensed. That is powerful. So powerful. Hey Heidi, how are you? Diane says, I say this to my children when they argue or fight. I make them tell each other 5 points that they love about each other, and it works. And I do that with my nephews as well, Diane. It works tremendously well. It's so good. It's amazing. I love my nephews. It's so cute. I was blowing kisses to my little one today, 6 years old. Because you give Uncle Steph a kiss, he goes, oh, that little one. This is with his little one. I mean, there's these big kisses to him, and he's like little baby ones. I had him on FaceTime with my brother. They don't live too far either, and I'm home at the moment, but I'm going to see them tomorrow. And it's just so cute. Oh, you got me thinking about my nephew and squeeze him. Okay, Love Rush is gone now. It's still there, but I'll get back on track here. Back on track. Okay, they're just so fucking cute. And I say to him all the time. I say to him, "Are you gonna let me kiss you and hug you when you're 20 like this?" Probably not. Because I love you, Uncle Steph. I said, I love you more. He goes, I love you more. He says, I love you more. He's 6 years old. He's incredible. Okay. And the love rush is over now. So we need to know what we want as people. There's number 4. We need to get really clear. And how do we do that? We need to explore. We need to ask the questions. We need to fulfill fantasies, perhaps. When it comes to relationships, when it comes to sexually relating, is exploring that within ourselves and not judging ourselves, not critiquing ourselves harshly for the types of relationships that we want. You know, I've been delving really deep into monogamy and non-monogamy of late. and really beginning to understand these different relational dynamics, and not only monogamy and non-monogamy, but the way people relate in so many different dynamics. To really understand what is it that people are yearning, what are the core feelings that people are yearning for, because ultimately it's about what we want. When we're talking about experience, when we're talking about what people pursue, it's because they're pursuing a feeling. So get to the core of what you want, get to the core of what you wish to feel, who you wish to be, get to the core of your belief systems, your models of reality, the way you understand the world, what you want. Where do you want to be in 10 years time, 20 years time? Everything. Look at all the areas of life. In my teachings, I have a 9-area of life model. This helps compartmentalize and break down what life is about. It simplifies life. Get clear on what you want in all those areas, especially in your relationship. How do you wish to be treated? How do you wish to live together? How do you wish to spend your time together? How do you wish to be affectionate? How do you wish to connect intimately? What does that mean for you? How do you wish to express? Do you understand your love languages? That's just another tool. So knowing what you want, when people do not know what they want, relationships break down, because we just move blindly through the world. It doesn't work. It becomes very painful. Last, but definitely not least, of course, last but definitely not least, is when we have an inability to express ourselves. I'm going to tie this sort of two in one here, but our ability to express ourselves emotionally. So when we are emotionally illiterate, and when we cannot consciously and openly communicate, when we do not know how to communicate effectively our truth and who we are, our relationships suffer. When we do not know how to emotionally express, when we're stunted in our emotional expression, when we're feeling pain, or we're feeling fear, or we're feeling anger, and we do not know how to healthily express that, that becomes painful for us. And we build resentment, we build fear, we build tension in our bodies. Our partners intuitively feel that. The people that care for us in our lives intuitively feel that. They connect to that. And then they ask, what's wrong? It's a standard question. What's wrong? What's up? What's going on with you? What's going on is an inability to connect and express and communicate. We need to learn how to communicate our truth. And again, let's go back to transference for a moment. Let's go back to the implicit drivers, the unconscious beliefs that drive our behaviors. Let's look at that for a moment. And many of us can't express and can't communicate because they've been taught that if you communicate and express yourself, if you communicate and express your truth, you may hurt someone else, and that's not good. That's not healthy. So we keep things within ourselves. I've been that person before. It's painful. It's painful to keep expression in when all you want to do is speak openly and communicate openly. You know, we find that it's less painful and less fearful when we actually communicate and we actually express ourselves. And if we can do that with people that we trust, respect, and revere, and also be patient during that process, understand that their pain points may arise, their own pain points may arise in that interconnecting, that communication as you express your own pain or your own thoughts or your own ideas about the world. It doesn't necessarily have to be painful. So it's about holding each other, being compassionate, being empathetic, taking a breath, power of pause, just breathe, literally just breathe. Physiologically, breathing on our nervous system is so empowering. Physiologically, breathing on our emotional state is so empowering. Just breathe. When you express yourself fully and openly and from a place of sincere and deliberate intention, not to hurt another, but to simply speak your truth so that you may live your truth and the other may live their truth as well. That is empowering for both of you. You begin to transcend selfish-based, hyper-selfish-based relationships, and you move into a relationship of equality and equity. And that's important. So again, all of this is interconnected, looking at your own patterns and how you show up in life and observing what bothers me, what really what really drives me to behave in this way. And we lack that emotional expression, and we don't verbalize, we don't add verbiage to those emotions, we become hindered in our being, and we literally just move through the world we move through the world in a painful way. So here it is. When you know yourself and you begin to explore who you are with greater efficacy, greater clarity, a greater sense of yearning and wanting to be present, and you do that not only for you, but you do that for your loved ones and the people that you care about deeply, your whole world will change. The way you communicate, connect, and feel will change. And it will change for the better. And you may move through some pain and some difficulty and some fear and a heap of everything else. But you know what? It's worth it. It really is. Very, very much so. Everything that I've mentioned here today with you, everything that I've spoken to today with you, is something that I have deeply felt myself in my own journey, in my own life, in my own relationships. And I've learned the difficult way, the challenging way. I've learned in a painful way, but there's no regrets around that. We needn't all learn in a painful way though. And this is the beauty of being a relational social being. We are here to learn from each other. We're here to grow from each other, to be with each other. And you know, when all else fails, when you just feel really, really disconnected from life, and you don't know what to do, and you don't have the tools, and you can't access the techniques, and you just feel so disempowered and so disconnected, guess what? Life still loves you. The cosmos sees you as something of neutrality. You are loved. Let me elaborate. When you're stuck, when you have no idea what to do, who to be, where to go, just fucking move your body. Literally just move your body. Go for a walk, go for a run, dance, put some music on. Quickest way to change your state is to change your environment. Get out of whatever you're in and get into something that feeds your soul. Get into nature. Swim in the ocean. Go for a hike in the mountains, in the forest, in the bush, whatever it may be. Plant your feet in the grass. Get some good clean food in you. Dance. Move your body. Feel your body. Put some really awesome music on and just move. Get yourself out of that state so that you can gain clarity and openness, and then ask these powerful questions with a very specific intention to transmute where you are. And you know what happens? I'll tell you what happens. I'm not going to tell you what happens, actually. Because when you do it, I want you to feel what happens. And when you feel it, then you know it. Then you embody it. Life still loves you. Yes, friend, my love, life still loves you. Move your body. Get out of that stuckness and move into liberation, freedom. It begins with this corporeal being, this body. Love this body. It's all you have. You have a lot more, actually. But as a starting point, as a foundation, this is it. Your body is it. I can love you and leave you. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for interacting. Thank you for sharing your own experiences as well and adding so much value to this community, to this tribe. Some magnificent and massive things occurring in the next few months on so many levels, and not just for me and my service. I'm involved in some amazing projects right now, an amazing service to humanity as well. highvibe.network. Actually, I'm going to drop that in there right now. But also the cosmos, our earth, our global society is shifting. We are changing. We are moving through the world differently. It's becoming very powerful. So jump on board with that transmission, that transformation. You are empowered. You have the power to do what you need to do, to be who you need to be. Do not disempower yourself by having that lack of belief in your power. Really honoring that within you. If you believe in this message, if you feel this message can help someone, please share it. Please share it far and wide. And I will see you again very soon. Many blessings on your journey. And as always, one is glad to be of service.